Baby, here I go, start the show. Beat on my heart, now about to explode. I'm about to explode. Feel good, what I'm feeling, what I'm feeling.
Well, hello. Good evening and happy Thursday night to everyone. I am Erica Salee, Transformation Success Coach, and this is Ignite Your True Self. And this is the late evening edition. I just want to say this before we get into the topic for tonight, which happens to be something that's very apropos for just the moment that I'm in. I had scheduled the broadcast at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As you all know, if you have watched the last two episodes and if you've seen the posts for this week's episode, but life happened and had death in the family. Today was the service and spending time with the family, and that was important. And so I decided to just kind of let this time be what it needed to be. And here I am spending a little bit of time with you. So I don't know if you have wound down or are winding down. Let me say that again. If you have wound down or are winding down for the evening. So I'm going to make this conversation really quick, but hopefully it is something that is impactful for you to take away with you to kind of ponder on as we think about this whole idea of thinking about the things that often stop us, right? So this is all about enlightening you about what some of those things might be. And then, of course, giving you the fuel, the little spark that you might need to keep going forward and to really continue creating the best version of yourself. So if you happen to be here with me live, then let me take this opportunity to welcome you. If you happen to come in and see the replay either on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, then I do want you to use the hashtag Ignite Your True Self. Let me know that you had an opportunity to stop in, to listen to the show, and to share your comments. And I will look at those comments and respond back to you as you hashtag Ignite Your True Self. So let me just jump right into the topic for tonight. Tonight's topic is a simple question. And that is, are you maximizing your time? Now, I got to tell you, before the events of the last week or so in my family, this conversation was already planned. Topic was already defined for tonight. And so, interestingly enough, coming in a little bit later, and then pondering this question, are you maximizing your time? And so today's time was all about putting it in the direction where it needed to go. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But that is the conversation for tonight. Are you maximizing your time? And so, here's the thing. When we don't utilize our time wisely, and I'm sure that we all have had those moments where we have allowed time to slip away. And so the question or the response to that is that when we do that, we are not utilizing the best resource or one of the best resources that we have, and that is time. Now, here's the thing. As I have this conversation tonight, and it's just like, the show was supposed to start at 7 o'clock, and here we are, 9:30 p.m., 2.5 hours beyond that. But when we think about time, there are certain things that play into the conversation about how we're utilizing it. And so when I talk about the topics for tonight, I think that is very fitting that everything that has happened today kind of moves into this conversation. So again, are you maximizing the time? So what I want you to do is, leave a comment. If you've ever said to yourself, oh my gosh, I just don't, I don't have time. I can't find the time that I need to do the things that I want or need to do. If you have ever said it or thought it, then yes, I want you to type it in the comments and let me know. Yep, that's me. And I'll be honest with you. Yes, that has been me. And I'm sure that anybody who is watching this conversation can attest to the fact that it feels like, all the hours in the day are sucked up by everything that you need or want to do. Before we get started, I want to share these two things with you. And the first thing is that we often say, I need to find the time. I need to find the time to do this. I need to find the time to do that. And what I want you to think about in this conversation is that it's not about finding the time, because we've already been allotted 24 hours in a day. So instead of trying to find the time, if we think about it, to say, oh, well, let me take the time. Let me take the time to do this. Let me take the time to do that. So that's the first thing that I want you to think about as we get into the tips that I want to share with you. It is not about finding time, because finding implies that it's somewhere and we can't, it doesn't exist, or we've lost it, or I know it was here somewhere. Let me look for it. But if you pick up your phone and you look at the time, you're like, oh, it's 9:36. Then that means time is already here. We don't have to find it. We just have to take the time to do X, Y, and Z. And I know you're probably saying, oh, but okay, we're getting to that. So here's the second thing. And this is kind of why I think tonight fits into this conversation, is that we often say, I want to maximize my time. And really what we're saying, what that equates to a lot of times for many of us, is squeezing every single ounce out of the day, right? Meaning we're always moving, we're constantly doing something, we're, always on the go, maximizing every hour. I've got to fit all these little pieces into this time. But really, maximizing the time means that we're doing the most important things. And so it might not be the list of 10 things that you have. It might be the 3 things that are most important. And so, when I think about today, there were 2 things that I knew that were very important. One, I needed to be with my family to celebrate my loved one and her memory. And 2, I wanted to spend time with you, having this conversation. So when we talk about maximizing the time, it doesn't mean that, all 24 hours in a day have to be filled with doing something. It means that we're doing the things that matter most and that are most important. So I wanted to kind of lay out those 2 things before we get into the conversation for tonight. So let's just jump right into the first couple of tips that I want to share. Actually, I'm going to share 3 tips with you tonight as well. I used to say that there are just not enough hours in a day. And again, if you have ever said this, it's not enough hours in a day, because there's so much going on between working, you're taking care of your family, maybe you're running a business, maybe you're part of an organization, you're doing stuff in your community. And so you look up and you're just like, oh my gosh, where'd the time go? And so when we think about that, there's not enough hours in a day. There's not enough hours in a day. So how do you then begin to maximize your time if you know that that has been the pattern of language that we've been speaking, right? So here's the first tip. And this is going to sound really, really simple. And sometimes the shift or the spark that we need to just kind of shift us into a new space is just that simple. So here is the first tip. The first tip is to stop saying you don't have enough time. Now, if you have ever worked with me, or if you've ever had a conversation with me before, you know that I will say, the more you say something, the more it becomes reality. So if we stop saying that we don't have enough time, then we begin to just shift the narrative in our own mind. And really, when I'm in these conversations during Ignite Your True Self, when I'm having a conversation, whether I'm posting or doing a live or working with a client, that's one of the things that I'm always, 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 always going to fall back on. And that is, we have to be very careful about what we think and what we say. So if we stop saying we don't have enough time, and let me even shift it around a little bit. The more we say we don't have time, guess what's going to happen? The more we won't have time. It's like we are creating something. And so the first tip is to just begin to shift our mindset and shift the way we refer to time. I don't have enough time. Well, what if we started saying, you know what? I have more than enough time to do X, or I have just the right amount of time to do Y. So we're really shifting the language that we're using as it relates to time. That is the first and probably the simplest concept to embrace. And I know it might sound a little strange because you might say to yourself, well, I'm saying it. If I stop saying that I don't have enough time, but I'm still finding myself in these tight spots, the more you say it, I have more than enough time. I've got enough time to do this. I have all the time that I need. Then that begins to change the dynamic of how time shows up. All right. So that's the first tip. And I know. It's kind of odd to think of it that way. But again, simplicity is where it starts and where the shift begins to happen. All right. So the language that we speak, stop saying that you don't have enough time and shift that into saying, I have more than enough time, or have just the right amount of time that I need in order to do what I need to do. Okay. So here is the second. And this is something that I think we can all identify with, but I'm gonna just tell you my story about how this relates to me. So if you're watching right now, whether you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, that means that you are connected to social media. Okay. I will tell you that this is probably one of the areas that I have to watch myself very closely with, because there are things that can snatch away the time that we've been given. So when we say we don't have time, a lot of that has to do with areas where we're spending time that become all consuming. Okay. So there are times when I will pick up my phone, the phone that I dropped on a concrete floor visiting my daughter one day. So it's all cracked up on the back. You might not be able to see that, but I will pick up my phone, and if I go to check social media, I'll check all the platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I might go to YouTube, might check my email. And if I'm not careful, I have spent about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes scrolling, and don't let me get engaged in a conversation. I was actually I deleted my Twitter account. I'm just going to be have a real conversation about that for just a moment. So I deleted my Twitter account, and the reason I deleted is because there was a lot of stuff going on that I just didn't set right with me. First of all, Twitter is a great platform to connect, to communicate, but it can also be just like any other social media platform. It could be a place to just pull you in, and you see a lot of mean, nasty conversation, and then you see something, and then you get ready to respond. And so I pull myself away. So I deleted my Twitter account. And a couple days ago, I heard something in the news that really got me riled up. And I thought, I need to go to Twitter and have more conversation about this, because I was feeling some kind of way about it. So I set up my account again, set up the account, and I'm thinking about the thing that really got me thinking, okay, I need to post about this. So get everything set up, and I go to post, type my little stuff in, and I went to hit tweet, and it would not. I hit it again. It would not. And I thought, okay, maybe I didn't set something up right. And the right before I went to hit tweet the third time, I was like, you know what? this isn't supposed to happen. See, this is why you pulled yourself away, because of all the platforms, all the social media platforms. That's the one that would just pull me in. And with stuff going on, I would, share my thoughts, and it would just kind of get me to a place that I didn't really like. Okay. And it would also show me things from other people that I really didn't like. Okay. So as I was doing that, it brought me to this point. And I said, there are things, and the reason why I was so glad that that tweet did not go out, um, is because it reminded me of the very thing that often pulls us into something and pulls us away from something else that we really should or want to do. Okay. So when we think about not having the time, we often have to remind ourselves or think about, well, what is the thing that is really pulling me away? Like, let's say, for instance, if you decide that you want to go back to school, okay? And you need to do some research to try to figure out all the details, like, okay, what's the class description, what are the hours, are there prerequisites, like whatever it is that you need to find out, and you need to spend some time doing that. If you allow social media, this is just one example. Now, you could have many other distractions. It could be television, it could be going out with friends or talking to friends all the time. And not that you don't need to do those things, but when we think about maximizing the time, it is okay, is this taken away from something else that I need to be doing? So when I'm thinking about not getting pulled back in, because I knew that if I had sent that tweet, I'd be looking to see, okay, who responded and what do I need to say back? Like, that's how quickly we can get consumed. And if I had spent another 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes engaging in that space, then where else could that 25 minutes have been utilized? Where else could I have spent that time? So I want you to think about, for you, like, what is the thing that might consume you? Like, I literally, and I've said this before, there are times when I will have to put my phone in another space, or I have to, if the phone is near me, sometimes I'll turn it face down, because it's so easy to pick up and get pulled in. And then if I say to myself, man, I had allotted, an hour to work on this social media calendar, ironically enough. um, but if I'm consumed with social media, then I'm not working on my social media calendar for things that are important for me to get out to share with you. So here's the thing to think about. Um, and this is what was taking me to the second tip, is to evaluate how you are spending your time. Okay. Evaluate how you're spending your time. And if you recognize there might be something for you that you say, yep, that my thing is, or the thing that stands in the way or consumes my time, you might also be able to identify with the fact, yeah, social media for me too. If that's you, type it in the comment, let me know. Because I know I'm not the only one. And if that sounds familiar to you, or maybe there's something else that that really takes away from the thing that you really, really want to do. And you get to define what that is. And it might change over, the course of a day. Maybe one day you want to get your house cleaned. Or maybe the next day you want to go do your groceries. Or maybe you want to really sit down and focus on writing a blog or writing a book. And you know that these are things that you want to do. So when you think about this second tip and you keep saying to yourself, well, but I don't have time to do that. Well, think about this tip right here. Then how are you spending your time? Like, what is it that you're doing? And I'm gonna give you an exercise to do in order for you to really figure out what that time looks like, or where it's being allocated. So if you pick one day and you say, you know what, I'm going to take this day and I'm going to go through and figure out where time is being allocated. You can start at like 7 o'clock in the morning, or whatever time. I'm just going to say 7 o'clock, 7 a.m. to say 7 p.m. And if you go through your day and you start from that point or whatever point you define, and you say, okay, how is this hour being spent? Okay, 7 to 7:15. I'm taking a shower, getting ready for the day. Let's say 7:15 to 7:45. I'm getting my breakfast together. 7:45 to 8:30. I'm on the road driving. Like, really think about where those hours are being spent. But here's the key: is to be honest about what's happening through the course of the day. So if you know, excuse me, let's just say social media. If you know that, let's say you take your lunch break at 12 and you say, okay, so from 12 to 1, I have lunch. But from 12 to 12:30, I'm checking social media, right? And then you look up and you say, dang, I don't have time to eat lunch. You see how where that is? I don't have time to eat lunch. Well, 12 to 12:30, you're checking social media. And oh, wait, I was supposed to drive here, pick up my lunch, come back, sit down and eat it. Oh, darn, I don't have time to do that. So, like, literally map out how those hours are being spent. So 12 to 12:30, I was checking social media. Oh my goodness, I only had 30 minutes left for lunch. So then I had to drive to get my lunch, came back 1 o'clock, set my lunch down, didn't have a chance to eat it. So, like, really think about that, and really um show yourself the reality. Okay, because that's when you begin to see where the time is being allocated. So I have a template that I've created, and I use this in my healthy living program, because it really lays out all the time for you. So I'm going to upload or share the link so that you can download the template and just use it as a guide to say, okay, if I had to gauge this for one day, now you can do it for longer than a day because you might have certain days that are heavier loaded than others. So pick a couple days, but at least start with one. Use the template so that you can say, okay, I'm going to plot this time. And what you might want to do is you might spread it out over the course of a couple days and then compare them. So you can say, okay, on this day, yeah, I spent a little bit more time, talking on the phone, texting, and I was really trying to get this task done. But I realized that I spent about 30 minutes talking to someone when I may have been able to check in for 10, 15 minutes, and then I could have allocated that other time in this area. So really, when you go through this worksheet, the intent is to show you exactly that. Like, okay, here's what the day looked like. If I looked at this right here, this is probably where I could adjust the time. um let's say, for instance, if you say, gosh, I really want to work out. We're at the beginning of the year, and when people are starting to set goals, and if you didn't see the goals versus resolutions conversation from last week, I encourage you to go back and check that out, because there is a distinct difference. But let's say one of your goals is, what, I really want to work out. And you say, but darn, I don't have time to work out. By the time I get home, I got to cook dinner. I've got to make sure that I work on homework. Well, let's go to the cook dinner. That might be on this worksheet that you're going to download. Maybe you say, hey, man, you know what? On Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm spending an hour cooking dinner. So you might say to yourself, if I see that on Mondays and Wednesdays, and those are the days that I want to work out, then maybe what I would do is begin to think about, well, on Sunday, can I meal prep or make enough that will last me a couple days, so that on Monday and Wednesday, I'm not actually cooking for that hour, but I can devote that time, at least 30 minutes, to working out, right? So when you download this worksheet, it shows you all the time blocks, and then you go through and you plot out, what's actually happening, and it really gives you an opportunity to look at some allocations and readjust, right? But the only way that can happen is if you're really honest about what the time looks like, right? I will tell you, I use the social media example, because that is my space. That's the thing that when I think about maximizing time and I start to plot in my own assessment of the time, I'm like, yep, you spent 20 minutes looking through social media. So a couple days ago, and I still have things in my family room that kind of spread out in the floor, I had to reshift because I knew that there were things that I needed to do. So I literally had to put the phone down, turn it over, because I knew that that 20 minutes needed to be allocated to mapping out and planning some stuff that's going on, my calendar, in terms of projects and things that are coming out. So I'm going to post the link to that download. You can go ahead and you can print it out, or you can use it online. I think I have the Word version, so you should be able to just type in there, but really, really spend some time and like focus on, okay, let me just see what this looks like. And you'd be surprised at how much time you will find when you do that. All right. And you can have a little bit of fun with it. So here's the third task, or the third, I'm looking at my third tip. And this is what happens when you, how do I want to say this? So when we think about time, a lot of our concept is, oh my gosh, like there's so much that I have to do, and time doesn't seem to be on my side. Okay, going back to the I don't have enough time. So this third tip is intended to help refocus how we feel about time. So there are 24 hours in a day, right? Now, obviously, with 24 hours in a day, let's just assume that you're getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. All right. So that's leaving you with what, 17, 18-ish hours left. So even though there are 24 hours in a day and we're looking at all of the things that we're trying to cram into a day, if we think about breaking tasks into smaller chunks of time, then that might help us to reshift this idea of maximizing the time. Remember when I said maximizing time doesn't mean stretching everything into, like, oh my gosh, let me get this done. I got to get this done, this. But it might just mean if I can break it down and I can really chunk things out, then what I'm doing is I'm reserving some things for another time. So let's say today, you decide that, okay, I've got to, and you'll probably see this in the worksheet. When you download the worksheet, you'll see it, and specific days might pop out to you more clear than others, or clearer than others. Let's say you look at one day and you say, okay, I've got to go to work. I've got to take things to the dry cleaners. I've got to go to the grocery store. I've got to take my child to practice. I have to go get my nails done. So you might have all of these things, okay? So when you think about maximizing the time, you might say, well, what's the most important part? What's the most important thing? So as opposed to the 5 things, you're breaking them down into smaller chunks. So that means, okay, all right, yep, you got to go to work. The grocery store and picking up the dry cleaning. If I were to chunk that off and not try to cram that into today, and I move it to, say, tomorrow or another day in the week, then does that allow me to maximize time in a better way? Meaning, I'm looking at the most important thing to do in that particular day or in that moment. So it relieves me and it allows me to maximize time to do the most important thing, not all of the things. Does that make sense? Right? So I want to say that again, because I know how we can get pulled into wanting to get the to-do list accomplished. I have, let me see. And I'm going to be wrapping up this conversation. So I don't know, you might not be able to see this, but I'm going to try. All right. So here is yesterday. Okay. This to-do list from yesterday. actually, a lot of those things didn't get done because I was spending time with my family, right? So, what I had to do is think about how do I maximize the time that I need to invest in these things. Some of those things got moved to today. So I started checking them off because I was able to do a little bit of it when I, left the funeral. I came home, took some time to like breathe for a minute, took a minute to eat, and I just looked at a few of these things. I'm like, oh, I can send this email. Oh, I can. And I just kind of moved some of the other things around so that I didn't feel like, okay, I got to get every single one of these things done. So this tip, breaking tasks into smaller chunks, is really about saying to yourself, of all the things that's on this list, if I could just either break it off and do this entire thing at another time, or maybe I can take one task and break it down, and maybe there's a piece of it that gets done today, there's a piece of it that I can do tomorrow, or I can give myself a schedule as to how to weave that in. That is really chunking it down and maximizing the time. It also helps you to maintain your own sense of peace. Because when we have so many things going on, we get anxious, we get nervous, we get frustrated. There's a whole level of anxiety that comes along with it. So when we begin to maximize our time, we're also doing ourselves a favor because we're putting ourselves in the best position to be able to maintain the things that we're trying to put into that time frame in a healthier way. So those are the 3 tips. I'm going to run back through them really quickly as we begin to wrap up this conversation. So the first tip in maximizing your time is basically to shift your language around time. And that is to discontinue saying, you know what, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time, because the more you say it with me or type it in the comments, the more it's going to show up that way. And so we want to do our best to give ourselves time by saying, I have more than enough time to do the things that I need to do. And need to do is something that is for another conversation, because there's a whole lot in that as well. And I'm going to talk about that in just a few moments. So stop saying that you don't have enough time. Begin to say, I have more than enough time to do the things that I need to do. Evaluate how you're spending your time. You can download the worksheet that I put together. I'm going to place the link to that worksheet in the chat when the live is over, so that you can grab that and really do an assessment to see, how am I spending my time? And again, you can take one particular day, or you can do it over the course of a couple of days. I do encourage you to start with one day and go through the worksheet and really plot out your hours, plot out your tasks, plot out what you're doing in that time frame, and then expand it to a couple of days. And then that way you can compare and say, one day might be lighter, one day might be filled with more things. And so maybe you can move things or repurpose to another day to kind of spread some things out to give yourself the opportunity to utilize time a little bit more wisely. And then lastly, is to break tasks into smaller chunks of time so that it doesn't feel like you've got to get everything done. Or if this one thing has like 10 moving parts, then kind of break it down and say, okay, these 2 parts I can do on this date, and then the other 2 I might have to move to something else. You might have to spread it out, over a couple of days, maybe even a couple of weeks, just to give yourself the opportunity to put some measures and milestones in place to separate, so that you're like, okay, I don't feel like I gotta like compound all these things together. Here's one of the things that I will say. I am going to post the information about this, so be sure to look for the link to this as well. But I'm going to invite you to join me for my virtual session on February the 7th at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The session is about gaining clarity and getting results for any change. Now, inside of that conversation, I give you a very specific, say that with me 10 times fast, 10 times slow, the way that just came out. I give you a very specific strategy on how to allocate, prioritize. So this whole conversation about maximizing time, you can find a real systematic way to approach that. And I'm going to be sharing more about that in the Gain Clarity and Get Results for Any Change. That's a virtual session on February the 7th at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will post the registration link for that. That session is actually $77. You'll see more details about that, but I just wanted to give you the heads up on that. And that includes a session and then a follow-up Q&A session, because as you go through that exercise, I guarantee you there are going to be some things that pop up and you're like, oh my gosh. And especially if you download the worksheet, that will kind of give you some pre-work that you will kind of look and say, oh my gosh, like, you mean to tell me that on Mondays and Tuesdays, I'm spending all this time doing this when I could be doing that? Like, that's what the worksheet is intended to show you. And then, of course, when you start coming up with, okay, here's what I really want to focus on, then when I talk about the strategy and the Gain Clarity and Get Results for Any Change conversation, you'll really be able to see how to apply that. Okay, so with that being said, I know that I kind of fire hosed a lot and it's late. So I am getting ready to wind down, as I'm sure you are as well. So if you have listened to this conversation, I do want you to put your comments in the chat. So if you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on LinkedIn, you can also type in your comments on YouTube. And of course, if you are seeing this on YouTube, then I'm going to encourage you to subscribe, turn the notification bell on so that you see when new videos are uploaded, and also share this out with your community. And if you are thinking about this whole idea of like, oh gosh, maximizing the time, I'm really trying to figure out how to do things a little bit better, be more efficient, then you can always reach out to me at trusynergy.org if you have specific questions about how this conversation pertains to you individually. And also be on the lookout for the links that I'm going to post, the worksheet, as well as your opportunity to join me for the virtual session. So with that being said, I'm going to invite you to join me next Thursday, 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if there is a change, I will share that out. But this topic for next week is one that is near and dear to my heart, and that is make time for yourself. I'm going to hold it until next week. But this is something that is so very important. And because we are in the beginning of the year still, this is a perfect opportunity to ask yourself a question. What is it that I'm doing for me? And is this going to be the year when I invest the time in myself because I deserve it? So we're going to continue that conversation on next week. So I'm going to encourage you to join me then. And until then, I want you to take care of yourselves and be well, and do invite your friends, your family, your community to this conversation. I'm sure there are many conversations that you are having where people are saying, okay, I just need to figure out what that little spark is. I just need to just get a little bit to keep me moving forward. Well, if that's the conversation that you're having with yourself, then you come on back here next week. If that's the conversation you're having with other people, then yes, do invite them into this space, because when we ignite that little something on the inside of us and share it out with the world, oh my gosh, how amazing it would be for us to share what we have been given to those that we are connected to, so that they too can be part of this fire that the world so desperately needs. And I know that you've got it, and it's time for us all to share it out. So on that note, I look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for being flexible enough to come into this late night conversation on the adjusted time. I do appreciate that. So I look forward to seeing you all again real soon. Until I do, take care of yourselves, and yes, be well. Good night.